catch big fish without fancy gear? Just know these 3 things. Hey there, fishing fanatics. Welcome back to Fishing 24 Hours, your go-to channel for killer fishing tips, tricks, and stories that make every trip an epic adventure. Today, we're busting a huge myth. You need a $1,000 rod, premium line, or high-end bait to land big fish. Truth is, gear is just a small piece of the puzzle. Skills and strategy are what count. With a basic rod, you can still reel in monsters if you know how to play the game. In this 2-part video, Fishing 24 Hours is sharing 3 game-changing tips to help you catch big fish using budget gear, picking the right time when fish feed hard, staying locked in on your float and reacting fast, and setting up near the bank where fish hide out. Even with a cheap rod or a $20 spinning reel, if you're patient, understand fish behavior, and pick the right spot, you'll pull in big ones like a pro. In part 1, we'll kick things off with the first tip and start the second. Then wrap it up in part 2 with the rest of the second tip, the third tip, a real-life story, and more. So, grab a coffee, get comfy, and let's turn your basic setup into a big fish machine. Fishing is an art. And that art isn't about how much you spend it. It's about how well you read the water and outsmart fish. Too many anglers think you need a fancy graphite rod, braided line, or pricey lures to catch trophy fish. But across America, from the backwaters of Tennessee to the lakes of Minnesota, seasoned anglers prove otherwise. With a basic fiberglass rod, cheap monoline, and homemade bait, they're hauling in largemouth bass, catfish, or crappie that make jaws drop. Their secret? Skill, patience, and the right tactics? These 3 tips we're covering will let you do the same, no matter how basic your gear is. Fishing isn't a gear flex. It's a battle of wits and observation. A high-end rod might cast farther or feel smoother, but if you don't know when fish feed, miss their bites, or fish in the wrong spot, even a $500 setup won't help. On the flip side, with a cheap rod, if you master these 3 tips, big fish will hit your hook like clockwork. Let us dive into the first tip and get started on the second to set you up for success, whether you're fishing a local pond or a big lake. The first tip is picking the right time when fish are feeding hard. Fish like bass, catfish, or bluegill don't eat all day. They have peak feeding windows. When hunger drives them to strike, the best times are early morning, from about 4:30 to 7 a.m., in late afternoon, from 4:30 to 6:30 p.m. Why? In the morning, after a night of resting, fish are starving and head to shallow waters near the bank to hunt insects or bait fish. In the late afternoon, as light dims, they feel safer leaving cover to feed. These windows are when fish are most aggressive, ready to hit your bait, giving you a shot at big ones even with a $10 rod. To make the most of these times, plan ahead. For morning trips, hit the lake before dawn, with your gear ready to cast as soon as fish start feeding. Watch the water for signs ripples, bubbles, or splashes mean fish are active. In the afternoon, get to your spot early to avoid spooking fish as light fades. Even a basic rod, like a $15 fiberglass model from a big box store, can land big fish if you cast when they're hungriest. Timing beats fancy gear every time. A pro tip for nailing the timing is to watch the weather. Cool, overcast days or times just before a rain are prime, as changes in air pressure rev up fish feeding instincts. If you see clouds rolling in or feel a light breeze, that's your signal to hit the water. Pairing peak feeding times with weather like this will have fish slamming your bait, no matter how cheap your setup is. For example, if you're fishing a lake in Georgia and a summer storm's brewing, get out there at 5 a.m. or 5 p.m. You'll see bass or catfish go wild. Another way to boost your timing is to check local conditions. In spring, fish feed earlier in the morning as water warms up. In fall, late afternoons are hotter as fish bulk up for winter. If you're on a river like the Mississippi, watch for days when the current slows, as fish move closer to the bank to feed. Even with a basic rod, hitting these windows means your bait's in front of hungry fish, ready to strike. You dante, need a fancy reel to cash in on nature. Your schedule's just a good alarm clock and a plan. Let us move to the second tip. Staying laser focused on your float and reacting at the right moment. A high-end rod might give you better feel, but with a budget rod, your eyes and focus are your biggest assets. Your float is your window into what's happening underwater, and every twitch tells a story. A slight bob might mean a fish is testing your bait. Quick dip means a solid bite. The key is reading these signs and acting fast without yanking too soon. Jerking too early or too late can cost you big fish, especially the cautious ones like trophy bass or channel cats. With budget gear, use a sensitive float, like a feather float or an LED bobber for evening fishing. These catch even the lightest nibbles, perfect for spotting bites from big fish that often bite carefully. Set your float so the bait hovers 8 to 12 inches off the bottom in shallow water, where fish feed. Watch your float like a hawk, but don't just stare scan the water around it for ripples or bubbles, signs fish are closing in. If you're fishing a murky pond in Texas, bubbles near your float might mean a catfish is sniffing around. Reacting promptly is what seals the deal. If your float twitches lightly, hold off fit might be a fish mouthing the bait. Wait for a clear dip, steady pull, or full submersion, then set the hook with a quick controlled jerk. With a cheap rod, don't yank too hard, you'll snap the line or miss the fish. If you're using budget mono line, check it for nicks or wear before each trip, as weak line is the main reason big fish get away. For example, a frayed 6-pound line won't hold a 10-pound catfish, no matter how good your rod is. A trick to boost your focus is keeping your rod steady. With a hand rod, rest it on a rod holder, or hold it lightly to avoid shaking. If you're using a cheap spinning reel, set the drag just right, not too tight to break the line, not too loose to lose control. Staying sharp and patient will land you big fish, even with a $5 rod and a basic float. In places like Lake Fork, anglers with basic gear catch big bass by watching their floats like pros and timing their hook sets just right. Let us pick up where we left off with the second tip, staying laser focused on your float and reacting at the right moment. We talked about how your float is your underwater radar, showing every nibble or bite. With budget gear, a sensitive float like a feather float or lead bobber is key, especially for evening fishing when light's low. But focus isn't just about staring, it's about reading the whole picture. Ripples or bubbles near your float can mean fish are moving in, especially in places like Florida's Everglades, where catfish prowl at dusk. To nail your reaction, practice patience. Big fish, like largemouth bass or channel cats, often nibble before committing. If your float bobs lightly, don't jerk, wait for a solid dip or pull. Then, set the hook with a quick, smooth motion. With a cheap rod, too much force can snap your line, so keep it controlled. Check your mono line for wear before each trip. Nicks or frays are a death sentence for landing big fish. A $10 rod with a sharp eye can outfish a $200 setup if you time your hook set right. Another way to boost your focus is to minimize distractions. If you're fishing a busy lake in Michigan, pick a quiet corner to keep your eyes on the float. Use a rod holder for a hand rod to avoid hand fatigue. Or adjust your spinning reel's drag to balance control and flexibility. Staying dialed in lets you catch subtle bites, turning a basic setup into a trophy catching machine. With practice, you'll read your float like a pro, no matter how cheap your gear. Now, let's hit the third tip. Setting up near the bank where fish hide out. Big fish don't cruise open water, they stick to safe spots like lily pads, tree roots, or rocky crevices. These areas are feeding zones packed with insects, minnows, or plant debris. Target shallow water, about 1.5 to 5 feet deep. Near the bank where you find cover like lily pads, fallen logs, or rock piles. These are fish diners, and dropping your bait there is like ringing a dinner bell for bass, catfish, or crappie. Scout your spot before casting. Look for bubbles, splashes, or shadows near the bank signs. Fish are active. Lily pads are prime for largemouth bass, who hide underneath to ambush prey. Tree roots draw catfish, lurking in the shade. Rocky crevices or slow current bends attract crappie and bluegill, as food gets trapped there. Cast 3 to 6 feet from cover to avoid snags but stay in the feeding zone. In places like Kentucky Lake, anglers hit big fish by targeting these hot spots with basic gear. Even with budget gear, you can cast accurately with practice. With a hand rod, use a smooth flick to place your bait in the hot spot. If you're using a cheap spinning reel, go for one with a soft tip for better control. Use a small sinker or none in shallow water to let your bait sink naturally, mimicking real food. Near lily pads, keep your line clear of leaves position, your float where it's visible but not tangled. A $15 rod can hit these spots as well as a high-end one if you practice your aim. Here's a story to prove it works. Mike, a local angler in Tennessee, fished a small lake with a $12 rod from a garage sale and basic monoline. One early morning, he set up near a fallen log at 5 a.m. when fish were feeding hard. Using night crawlers and a cheap feather float, he watched closely. When the float dove, he waited a beat, then set the hook gently. A 6-pound largemouth bass was on. His secret: hit the right time, watch the float like a hawk, and fish near cover. Cheap gear still gets it done. Mike's catch shows skills trump gear. To use these tips like a pro, prep smart. Check the weather for cool or cloudy days to hit peak feeding times, or late afternoons. Pack strong-smelling baits, night crawlers, shrimp, or chicken liver, and keep them fresh in a cooler. Use a basic rod, but check the line and hook for where to handle big fish. Find a spot near lily pads, roots, or rocks, scouting for fish signs like ripples before casting. Stay focused, react at the right moment, and be patient. Big fish often test bait first, just for conditions to level up. In the morning, fish hug the bank, so cast close to lily pads. In the afternoon, they might drift 6 to 10 feet out. In murky water, use stinkier bait like liver to draw fish from afar. In rivers, cast just upstream of bends to let scent pool. With budget gear, inspect your rod for cracks to avoid snapping on a big fish. These tweaks make your cheap setup deadly. Whether you're on a Midwest pond or a southern river, new to fishing, these tips are perfect for learning. Start at a local pond with shallow banks using a cheap rod, feather float, and worms. Log where you get bites like bass near logs or catfish by rocks. Don't sweat missed fish. Each one sharpens your timing. Fishing with basic gear builds observation, patience, and reaction skills, setting you up for big catches. Another real-world example. Sarah, a beginner in Alabama, used a $15 rod and mono line. She fished a creek at dusk, targeting a spot near rocks. With chicken liver and a steady eye on her float, she hooked a 4-pound channel cat in 20 minutes. Aya said, "I didn't need fancy gear, just the right spot and timing." Her story shows anyone can catch big fish with basic tools. To boost your game, practice casting and float watching. Spend a few trips targeting spots near lily pads or roots, timing your hook sets. With homemade baits like fermented worms, ensure the smell is strong. With a cheap rod, avoid hard yanks, use steady pressure to hook fish. In crowded spots, pick a quiet corner to keep fish calm. These details turn your budget gear into a big fish weapon. One extra tip: combine these tricks with natural conditions. On new moon days like we covered in a previous Fishing 24 Hours video, fish are even bolder, especially at dawn. Drop bait near lily pads at 5 a.m. on lunar day 1, and you'll see a hot spot come alive. Or, if a breeze pushes toward the bank, fish where waves trap bugs. These combos make big catches easy without breaking the bank. Most importantly, stay patient and trust your skills. Big fish are smart. They nibble before committing. With budget gear, you might lose a few to weak line or a shaky rod, but each miss teaches you something. Note what works, like when bass hit near roots or catfish bite at dusk. Over time, you'll develop a pro's instinct, turning your cheap setup into a trophy catching machine. That's it, folks. We've covered catching big fish without fancy gear, hitting early mornings or late afternoons, staying sharp on your float and reacting right, and setting up near lily pads, roots, or rocks. I hope you're pumped to hit the water with your budget setup and reel in monsters. Smash that like, share with your fishing buddies, and subscribe to Fishing 24 Hours for more real deal tips. Got a story about a big fish on cheap gear? Drop it in the comments. I'm all ears. Tight lines and big catches. See you next time.